actually down an author right now. Lauren Oliver is frantically making her way down here, so when she comes in, I think we should all cheer. And she'll sit down there, so we'll give her a big welcome. Welcome to Kill or Be Killed, Crafting a Powerful Female Protagonist. Our objective today is to talk about the rise of the powerful female protagonist, especially in YA fiction. So, with the popularity of YA novels like Suzanne Collins' The Hunger Games and many other YA bestsellers and film adaptations, the so-called butt-kicking, powerful female protagonist is becoming increasingly popular. Our objective with our time today is to discuss the powerful heroine in YA speculative fiction. So first I'm going to introduce myself and then the panelists, and we'll get down to the questions, and we'll leave some time for questions from the audience at the end. So my name is Thea James, and I am one half of the book review duo known as the Book Smugglers. We review a lot of science fiction, fantasy, and of course YA with a focus on female authors and female protagonists. And then I'll go down the line. So this is Danielle Paige, and Danielle is the forthcoming author of Dorothy Must Die, which is coming out next year. April of next year. Danielle actually used to write for a television soap opera and is now turned to writing young adult fiction. Then we have Kendare Blake, and Kendare is the author of such YA horror novels, Anna Just in Blood, and she's also the new author of the new series Antigoddess. Then there is Amelia Kahaney, and Amelia is the author of, I'm blanking right now, the Brokenhearted, sorry, nerves, and she is from San Diego, California. And Amelia, you live in Brooklyn right now, is that right? I do. Great. All right, Lindsay Ribar, am I saying that right? Lindsay she's a literary agent at one of the houses here, and she also specializes in speculative fiction for teens in her day job, but she's also the author of The Art of Wishing, which is a wonderful book. And then finally, Lauren Oliver at the end here is the author of the Delirium trilogy, and also will be talking about some of her forthcoming projects. So, that's all the panelists. Let's get started and talk about your books, and more importantly, your heroines. I would like each of you to tell us a little bit about your current books, what defines your heroines, and what makes them powerful. What qualities or characteristics do you have in mind when you're crafting your characters? So why don't we start with you?
Hi everybody, it's my first panel, so be gentle with me. My book is called Dorothy Must Die, and it's about Amy Gum. She is a misfit. She's in high school. She's called Salvation Amy by her friends because she doesn't really have friends, but she wants nothing but to get out of Kansas. And one day she's lucky enough to have her trailer get picked up by a tornado and it lands in Oz. But it's not the Oz that we remember. It is darker and scarier and twistier, and Dorothy is now evil. So she is enlisted by formerly wicked witches, or they seem formerly wicked, and they want her to take down the Tin Man and the Scarecrow, and she has to take the Scarecrow's brains and the Tin Man's heart, and the life's courage, and finally Dorothy must die. What do I look for? What was the first question?
What makes your heroine powerful, and what qualities do you try to write for in your characters?
I think Amy grew up with a very bad mother and no father, and is not having a great time of it in her real life, and she's really struggled to find some power there and not always figured that out. But when she gets to Oz, she's asked by this group of people that need her to save them, and it's about her figuring out how to step up and whether or not it's the right thing, because who knows what's wicked and what's not in your books.
Kendare, how about you?
Well, hello. My novel is Antigoddess, and it is about Greek gods who have been living amongst us since the fall of Mount Olympus, and now suddenly they each are going to die in these slow, disgusting, specific to their godhood type of painful deaths. My heroine is Athena, goddess of battle, goddess of wisdom, goddess of justice, and her sacred bird is the owl. She's actually becoming consumed by owl feathers from the inside out. So owl feathers will see her internal organs and then kind of like twist their way through her skin until they reach the surface and she's got to rip them free. When I think of her strength, I don't know, I kind of, I thought a whole lot about like Sarah Connor. You know, very, not like T1 Sarah Connor, but more like T2 and 5. But I also have another heroine, Cassandra, who is a teenage girl, lives in upstate New York, and what she doesn't know is that she's actually the reincarnation of the doomed prophetess Cassandra. So she's actually more like T1 Sarah Connor. So it's just Sarah Connor all around.
Hi everybody. My book, The Brokenhearted, is an homage to classic superhero origin stories. Very influenced by the Dark Knight franchise, which I'm a huge fan of. My protagonist is named Anthem Fleet. She lives a very sheltered, sort of regimented life with her real estate developer parents in a city that's Gotham-like called Bedlam, which has a river running through it that is known as the Crime Line. It's a crime-ridden city divided by north and south. And in the north, people are very, very rich. In the south, which is much larger, people are very, very poor. So Anthem has sort of always followed the rules, and then of course she meets a boy from the south side, and everything changes for her. Very quickly, he is kidnapped, and as she's trying to get him back, she dies essentially, and is taken to a fugitive scientist's underground lab, and she's given a heart that is made partly from hummingbird DNA. And so over the course of the book, she learns how to kind of handle life with this new heart, which makes her very fast and very strong. And she begins to sort of go on a campaign of vigilante justice to try to bring that.
What makes your heroine stronger? What characteristics?
So my character starts out, I think, really weak and kind of a hot mess. And she has nowhere to go but up. And she reluctantly gets stronger and gets violent. And it really scares her. Bruce Wayne was a huge role model for me. Juliet from the Shadow Me series was also a big influence. Yeah, that's how she's strong. She's strong because she has a choice.
My book is called The Art of Wishing. It's about a girl who's a senior in high school. She's a singer-songwriter wannabe and an actress who's been in the drama club since the beginning of time, as far as she's concerned. Since this is a narrative, she discovers that this guy that she kind of knew from school a little bit is actually a genie. Not only that, she has become his master, which means that he knows her 3 wishes and kind of has to do whatever she says a little bit. But he brings with him a whole buttload of trouble, as it were, and she has to kind of deal with that and ends up having to save him from his evil genie ex. So at first she thinks that her strength is in her ability to make plans and follow through. Like she's a very organized person. She has her plays, she has her little group of friends, she has her family, and her life is make a plan, do the plan, make a plan, do the plan. But when this genie comes into her life, the world just opens up and everything is moving so fast around her, and she has to sort of find a new strength in her ability to adapt and think on her feet.
Lauren.
Hi. So I have the Delirium trilogy, and the main character is named Lena. She grows up in a world in which love has been declared a contagious disease and cured. And actually in advance of this, and then kind of over the course of the trilogy, it goes from a very kind of private story of one girl's evolution and change to a much more global political story. And in advance of this panel, I was also thinking about Lena as the protagonist, and then the protagonist, one of the protagonists, Heather, in my new book, Panic, which is not dystopian, it's realistic, but it's about these teens in this very impoverished town who play a game of fear to test their fear every summer. And I was realizing that actually both protagonists also, they don't start out particularly strong. Actually, they don't self-define as strong. They self-define as kind of the every girl who feels maybe even a little bit damaged or just a little bit as though there's nothing particularly special about them. And I think that's kind of because I identified with that persona more so when I was in high school, and I think a lot of people do. And then over the course of the book, as they're challenged and their ideologies are challenged, they come to basically, their strength comes in aligning their actions with kind of their values, where they have to make a decision to put themselves on one side or another, to act for the people they love, to stand up against oppression and tyranny. And I think that, so my father, in addition to writing books about, nonfiction books about serial killers, he also writes a lot about like heroes' journeys in film and in books, and I think you see a lot of heroes' journeys where the person starts out, again, not that strong, and then something changes. They lose a wife, they lose a child, they go on a course of vengeance. So for me, I'm really interested in the change, the growth from kind of weakness to a form of strength. So that's what I try to write about.
That's great. So you mentioned some self-definition. I'd like to talk about definitions now. So let's get into the concept of the strong female character. Could each of you really quickly define what you think of immediately when you hear that phrase? What is a strong or a powerful female character? And if you have an example that you can think of, Sarah Connor, Team 1, whatever, go for it. So let's go down the line again and start with Danielle.
Sometimes when I hear the word strong, I get a little annoyed. Honestly, about the idea, I think like I'm more interested in an interesting character in the arc that Lauren was talking about, where you start one way and become something else. But if I had to pick people, I would go Sarah Connor, or Mars, or Buffy, or Amelia. I'm really glad that we have somebody. And I hope I feel like I was lucky enough to have this big world of women, as Oz's witches, and Dorothy, and I have a lot to choose from.
Great. Kendare.
When I think of strong, a lot of different people. I think of Cersei Lannister from Game of Thrones. I think of Ripley from the Alien franchise. I don't necessarily think that strength, doesn't have to be physical strength. Most of these women are not physically strong. They certainly wield their power well. So, because physical strength will only take you so far. No matter how physically strong you are, eventually you're going to get something that's physically stronger. So you better have something else in your arsenal.
Yeah, I think all of the people that have been mentioned, I remember seeing Terminator and seeing her arms, right? That first shot where she's doing the pull-ups and being 12 and feeling, I'm dating myself. But, and just feeling like that was the first time I had ever seen that sort of strength film in a woman, that sort of muscular definition. But yeah, I would agree that a strong female character is a character that survives whatever horrific shit is being thrown at her. And I think we see that, from Edith Wharton and Jane Austen on up to today, Divergent, Hunger Games, anywhere else.
Actually, let's move to, since everyone's kind of mentioned it, right? So the concepts of strength and power are really loaded words, right? Female characters are often described as strong, especially in YA fiction. And really quickly, there was this article that came out recently, and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar has written about it in Esquire, but most notably, there's this New Statesman essay from Sophia McDougall, and she says, Sherlock Holmes gets to be brilliant, solitary, abrasive, bohemian, boastful, brave, sad, manipulative, neurotic, vain, untidy, fastidious, artistic, curious, crude, polymath, genius. Meanwhile, female characters get to be strong. And we do see this represented as physical strength in so many YA books. I mean, think about Katniss Everdeen or the Beautiful Creatures series with Lena being so powerful, right? Supernaturally strong. So what is your take on this division, and why are YA heroines, especially YA heroines, conflated with power and strength in physical or supernatural ways? Lindsay.
hear me? Yes. Okay, cool. So I think like the rise of the YA heroine is a little bit, us getting back at everybody else for doing that for so long. But strength alone can only take you so far, like you said. So I think that definition is kind of expanding as YA as a genre expands, and so strength doesn't necessarily have to mean survival no matter what, being able to kick somebody else's ass, or even being likable. Kendare brought up Cersei Lannister, who is like the most unlikable person on TV right now, but I freaking love her so much. Except for her, oh my god, don't even get me started. Anyway, you again brought up Game of Thrones. I think everybody's go-to for the YA style heroine there is Arya, who is awesome, do not get me wrong, but I really like Sansa. She's so, right? Yeah. Sansa. So she probably couldn't beat literally anyone in a fight ever, but the fact that she is willing to take everything that is thrown at her and just be like, nope, I don't care, I'm going to survive no matter what. That is real strength.
Yeah, it's funny because even before you interjected the commentary, the article, I was thinking actually that in my head, strength is pretty much only or always conflated with moral strength. People who have the ability to kind of single-handedly determine what is right and do what is right instead of what is easy. That's kind of which is why then when I was trying to think of like a character that embodies up for me, I thought of Catherine from Washington Square, Henry James Alba. My parents were literature professors, so I'm enjoying. But I don't think it's a bad thing either to show incredibly women with physical prowess in YA novels. There's a lot of ways in which women still, especially young girls, are taught that their bodies really are still, in this day and age, only useful for one thing, and it ain't kicking butt. So, to show a lot of heroines who actually have a physical relationship with their body, I think is actually a really also a positive thing. And I don't think that any of those characters are just defined, the characters that we mentioned, like Katniss, are just defined by their physical prowess. In fact, Katniss is, pretty much singular defining feature, at least in the first book, was just her sheer love for her sister and her ability, her desire to self-sacrifice. Plus, a lot of YA books also make the boys into caricatures too, and they're pretty much around only to brood and kiss, so.
Well, speaking of kissing and brooding, let's talk about romantic relationships. So Lauren and Amelia, in particular, your stories and heroines are kind of driven by, or initially sparked by their relationships with boys, right? So it takes the love of a boy for these heroines to realize their own self-worth, or to see the problems that are existing in their society. So why is this, and I'd love you to discuss these power implications. Maybe Amelia, you can go first.
Sure. I think that for me, Anthem was a very naive character at the start of the book, and that she really needed to be this crushed out, kind of semi-helpless character in order to be able to evolve. And I think that it's been pretty clear that readers see right away sort of how quickly the romance happens for her, and readers are kind of like, what is going on? And I guess without spoiling things, I'll just say that Anthem catches up to the reader by the end, and kind of realizes some of the mistakes that she's made. So I would own that, in her case, her journey really does start with the boy. And I would also suggest that for a lot of us, when we were teenagers, some of our evolution really happened around love affairs.
Well, I think it does. Not just when you're a teenager, but I think it's largely because, all the time, right now. But I think it's largely because, in my view, in Delirium, for example, the boy, Alex, is a mechanism by which Lena is placed into contact with the thing that she fears the most. That is the thing she fears the most. She believes that love is a disease. She believes it will kill her. She will be ostracized from her community. She will no longer have control over herself or her emotions. And similarly to then Panic, which totally different subject matter. But again, I do think that growth only happens if you're willing to step into a place where you're anxious, where you're afraid, where you don't know the outcome. That is where both like kind of love and fear grow in the same places and from the same places. So that is how Lena ultimately begins to evolve. It's only through going, stepping herself, bringing herself into contact with something that makes her deeply uncomfortable.
Kendare, how about you? You have some relationships in your new book, in Antigoddess, with the different goddesses and Odysseus and whatnot. Can you talk a little bit about the relationships there and the power dynamics between the women and men?
Well, I guess my girls are frequently, Athena's a goddess, so what kind of guy is going to have the gonads to hang with the goddess? I mean, you've got to be pretty assured in your manhood to be able to take on something like that. But Athena's, she has no problem in the physical arena, but where she is vulnerable is in the romance department. I mean, she's the virgin goddess. She doesn't understand love. She thinks it's pretty stupid. She sees it turn people into morons. So when those feelings start to be awakened into her, she really doesn't understand how to handle it. So that actually, the male component to her, she's a big tomboy, but it's still, that's where her vulnerability is showcased.
And Lindsay, in your book, you kind of flip that on its head. The power dynamics a little different, right? The guy is the genie and beholden to this woman, or this young woman. So can you talk about that relationship and the power dynamics there?
Yeah, I did that specifically because while I like a lot of the YA paranormals that are like big, strong, vampire, werewolf, whatever you may be, monster boyfriend with a weak little human girl, I wanted the guy with magical powers who exists basically to give all of his power to whoever his human master is, which is, in this case, Margot, the main character. So she discovers her power a little bit in her power over him, but what her relationship with him does, on a larger scale, is, in the beginning, she, like I said before, she's a planner. She thinks she knows everything. She thinks that if she, goes into something, any situation in her life that she could ever come across, knowing exactly what she's going to do, and then doing it, everything will be fine. But he teaches her that she doesn't know everything. The world is a lot bigger than she thought it was. And so her relationship, and I don't think this is necessarily specific to romantic relationships here. This could have happened if they were just friends too. But this is the kind of thing that any strong personal relationship does in your life, is just make you see the world a little differently, make you realize that there's more left to learn, that kind of thing.
And Danielle, your book isn't out yet. And I've only read the first 30 pages or so of the sample. Yeah. So can you talk a little bit about the power dynamics between, I don't know if there's a romantic relationship or if there's a friendship or, to Dorothy really hating her, protagonist going head to head.
Yeah, there's a couple boys in Oz, and any girl, if you see cute boys, think about them. But there is some romance. There's another witch, who's a wizard boy witch, who she falls for. But he's teaching her how to fight, and I think he's very different than her. He's been raised by witches. His entire life is about fighting Dorothy, and her life has been much smaller. And I think they come into each other, not liking each other at first, but they come together eventually. And I think that boys can learn from girls, girls can learn from boys. I don't think it's a very equal relationship, but it's not the main focus of my book. The biggest romance or anti-romance would be between her and Dorothy.
Well, that's actually a good segue to the next question. So heroines are kind of only one part of the equation, and there are also other female characters that are in these books. So I'd like each of you to discuss the other female characters in your books, and how do your female characters relate to each other? Does your book pass the Bechdel test? Are there, do they involve two or more women? Do they talk to each other? Do they talk to each other about something other than a boy or romantic relationships? So let's start with Lauren Oliver.
Yes. So I have had, yes, they pass. And my first book before I Fall actually featured 4 female friends, best friends. So I've had the same 3 best friends since I was 5 years old. I have their names tattooed on my back. You know, we've talked about many boys, but we've also talked about other things. So I think just, it's not that it's important for me to put in other female relationships, it's just that it's a natural constellation of my life. And so in Delirium, the Delirium series, there's kind of a constellation of 2 major female relationships, friendships that are important. The first is Hannah. Lena and Hannah are best friends, childhood best friends, and their relationship evolves in kind of interesting ways over the course of the series, and there is tension to some extent over a boy, but really actually the tension between them comes from Hannah's jealousy over losing her best friend to a boy. So they're not actually competing for the boy's affection, but I think for anybody who's ever had a really close female friend, you can have these feelings that are borderline. I mean, they have certain elements of almost romanticism to them. You're so close, you feel possessive of them, you can be jealous about where they spend their time. And then the second relationship is with a girl named Raven, whom Lena meets in subsequent books when she's living out in the wild, spoiler alert. And Raven is kind of modeled after my sister, actually. I'm very close to my sister. I also have her name tattooed on my ankle. And my sister is like 5'3", and very soft-spoken, and like the biggest badass you will ever meet in your entire life. She once hitchhiked through Egypt by herself, and a guy tried to get it on with her in a car, and she kicked him in the face and climbed out the window. She's amazing. I don't recommend that, though. So I think that, again, it's not even conscious, and the same thing is true in Panic. I mean, the main character, Heather, has a relationship with a girl named Nat with whom she's competing in the game. So that becomes a source of tension, but it has nothing to do with any kind of romantic situation. So yeah, but that's just because that's how my whole life has been. I love girls. They're great.
Aside from the love story in my book, the 2 biggest relationships that my main character has are with her best friend and her mother. And I just realized, like, as Lauren was talking, that by the end of my book, she's on the outs with both of them, which is a little bit problematic, but, I mean, for my character, I guess, whatever. Anyway, so Margot and her mother, they were like 2 women against the world for the longest time because the mother and father got divorced when Margot was really young. And the mother was like, you know what, I'm just going to raise my daughter, and we will just be awesome together. And Margot's like, yeah, cool. And that's how she became this, like, plan-making, going for it sort of person. But then a year before the book starts, Margot's mother got remarried to her father, and now she's just off all the time having romantic adventures of her own. And Margot's like, I don't understand this. My mother is not allowed to have a life without me. So that is the other element that sort of sets her on her path toward discovering the larger world a little bit. So, yeah, that's it.
When I first started writing Brokenhearted, I was talking to this Hollywood guy that I know, and I was like, I'm writing this female superhero story, and he's like, oh, well, if you ever want to sell it to Hollywood, if you're going to have a female superhero lead, everyone else has to be male. And I was like, hell no. Absolutely impossible. And what a weird YA novel that would be, right? It would just be unbearable. And unbearable to write and unrealistic. And I started thinking about, the few sort of superhero stories on screen, Angelina Jolie, that kind of stuff. And yeah, there's very few women kind of in that realm. Or they're the side character, right? Or they're kind of the back. So there's tons of women in my book. There's moms, there's a school principal, there's the mad scientist, fugitive mad scientist with a backstory of her own that's pretty hair curling, is also female. But the most fun for me was writing female villains. Gavin is taken by the Syndicate, which is kind of Bedlam's mafia or crime organization, and the person, heading up the band of thugs is a woman named Rosie, and I had so much fun writing her. She was kind of this gun moll, redone. She has another female villain that she works with who is the head of like a geisha brothel, sort of. And I hated to do what I had to do to those women toward the end. It's terrible to see the awful ways that Anthem hurt them. But yeah, they seldom talk about boys together. They're too busy, being really evil.
Okay, so thinking about this question, I just realized Antigoddess definitely passes, but Antigoddess in Blood totally fails. Oops. So let's talk about Antigoddess. When I was writing Antigoddess, what I had in mind, I really wanted to do this classic Greek-inspired hero's journey, and I wanted it to be a female hero. So in Antigoddess, the ladies run the show. It's extremely just women. It's called the Goddess War for a reason. It's not the God's War. It's not the God and Goddess War. It's just the Goddess War. So Athena is the leader of one faction, and Hera is the leader of the opposing faction. They don't spend a lot of time talking about boys because Athena doesn't like boys, and Athena is a tomboy, so she is very antagonistic towards other females. She doesn't understand characters like Aphrodite because Aphrodite is the goddess of love, and Athena is completely out of that element. She doesn't understand Hera because one, Hera is a big biatch, and two, goddess of marriage, she's whatever. She's sprang fully formed from her father's head, so she doesn't have a mother figure or anything like that to influence her in any way. My other female protagonist, Cassandra, the young girl, has a female best friend. They've been best friends for years. Strangely enough, that best friend, also a tomboy. I think I like tomboys. But yeah, and their friendship doesn't involve boys. They just talk about, normal things that friends talk about.
I'd say that I have the same wealth of material that Kendare has, in that even the original source material, Wizard of Oz is filled with women. There's Glenda, there's Ozma, who's the princess, who's the benevolent ruler. There's Dorothy. We have, and I added a few new people. I added a Goth Munchkin. She's a girl, and she's kick-ass. I think that there's just this wealth of women, and I didn't have to think about the test. I was lucky in that sense, but if you look back at the book, there are lots of scenes where girls talk to girls about girls, and not a lot of scenes where they talk about boys. So it was easy.
Well, when you're busy saving the world, maybe romance isn't the first thing on your mind. Okay, so what are some of your favorite book recommendations and why showcasing unique, inspiring, quote-unquote, powerful heroines? Let's start with Lauren.
I always do this because it's just like the last thing I read and loved, and I always confuse it with another book that has almost the exact same name. Okay, The Daughter of Smoke and Bone. Okay, because there's Shadow and Bone. It's very confusing, which I haven't read, but I heard is also amazing. And I primarily like the heroine for two reasons. One is that she has bright blue hair, which I always secretly wanted. And two is that she's just cool. She was kind of raised by monsters in a way, but she identifies with them. And it's actually a really cool inversion of angels versus demons, and you actually sympathize more with the demons. You end up sympathizing with both, actually, and it's a good book also in that each character has their own kind of moral, again, constellation, and it's not just what side they're aligned with. So that would be the one I read most recently that I loved.
I know this is a speculative fiction panel, but this is sort of meta-speculative, so it counts-ish, sort of. Fangirl by Rainbow Rowell. I don't know if you guys have read this, but it just came out, and it is about a freshman in college who finds her voice, and this is an incredibly socially awkward girl, so finding her voice in the college community is no small achievement for her through writing fan fiction.
Good for this crowd. The just to, I guess, also pick one that I read recently, there's an amazing new book called Not a Drop to Drink. It's about a girl living in sort of futuristic, or future, not futuristic at all, prairie-style Ohio. The cities are falling apart and people have moved to the country desperate for water. There's a terrible water shortage. And she has been raised by her mother, who put a gun in her hand when she was 7 years old and taught her how to shoot anyone who came near their house because they have water, they have a pond. And so it's, I would say 50% of the story is a girl, through the years on her roof with her rifle. And it's just an amazing, it's a really deceptively simple story that's really got so much heart. So that's the one most recently that I just loved, Not a Drop to Drink.
That was my recent one. So I'm gonna second that one because the main character, Lynn, is like seriously awesome. She's like John Wayne with vagina. And there's also a great coyote character in it called Big Bastard. And if you don't fall in love with him, then I don't know who you are. So I'm gonna go with something older that I read, and it's The Mists of Avalon by Marion Zimmer Bradley. And the main character, Morgaine, is, she's just, what do you say? She's just Morgaine, you should read it.
Actually, still my fangirl one. I literally just finished it yesterday and I love it. But I will say, I don't remember the author's name. It's called Out Above by a Love of Reading, and it's about a girl whose parents hire someone to teach her to read. So this woman is going to write her story for her, and it's just, she's overweight and awkward and in love with a boy who doesn't love her back. And I just found her so interesting because she's growing up and figuring stuff out, and I just felt very real to me.
We talked a little bit about villainesses, I guess. That's kind of a fun topic. And also, usually powerful female characters can also be, on the dark side. So, are there any notable villainesses that you guys have written about or read recently that you'd like to share? And let's start with
Villainesses. Yes, you all know my love of Cersei Lannister. I don't know. I think that female villains, I end up sympathizing with them. I'm the kind of girl who I read Snow White or I watch Snow White, and I always end up rooting for the wicked stepmother. Always. I'm just like, eat that girl's heart. You deserve it. You work so hard. So I think that in certain societies, particularly within fantasy world, women are still oppressed. Within the world of Game of Thrones, women are still oppressed. So for women like Cersei to turn to their wiles and to turn a little bit wicked only makes them more interesting. Their wickedness, the fact that they are wicked, makes them sympathetic because this is how a strong woman may behave under those circumstances. Something that was mentioned earlier, there are certain characteristics that are very well received in male characters, particularly curmudgeonliness or unlikability. But female characters, you have a really hard time. If your character, who is a woman, is unlikable all of a sudden, it's like throw the book over your shoulder. Well, I don't think that's acceptable because we all have unlikable characteristics within our own personalities. And why can't a girl be a curmudgeon? Why can't a woman be like Dr. House? Like if Dr. House was a chick, that show would never have gotten off the air. They would have just slapped her around and called her a bitch. So,
What is, I'm blanking on her name, in Breaking Bad, who's the corporate woman? Lydia. I just love Lydia so much. I love kind of her cold corporate nature, and she just seemed very real to me in a great way. And she's very weak and very powerful at the same time. Lady Macbeth is another favorite villainess. I loved writing, my own female villains. And I would love to see kind of female Breaking Bad, not with the same, meth cooking, but, an anti-heroine who starts out wonderful and becomes so unlikable. I can't think of anything
quite like that right now with a female star. Maybe you all know of one, but yeah, I just feel like there's so much room for complex women who are sort of not that pure and not that good.
All right, well, let's see. Oh, yeah, go for it. Okay.
No, I just want to say, because I have a complex relationship with that question, just because I also feel like there's such a double standard, and that's actually usually where it most shows up. And I mean, when I was little, literally like little, my mom taught me that if anybody ever called me a bitch, I should say thank you. And that's like part of my growing up. And I do feel like, if you have a female character that sexually manipulates people in her pursuit of power, it's Lady Macbeth, and if you have a male character that does it, it's Don Draper. You know what I mean? Like, so I think that the only bad female characters in my books, like Heather has a terrible mom in Panic, but her mom's terrible because she's basically weak. She loves to go out and drink, she does drugs, she's just not a responsible person, who's not a loving, caring person. But I tend not to kind of, characteristics of like ambition, like if I meet a woman who's like ambitious, intelligent, eviscerating in humor, I'm like, wow, I want to be you. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think she's a villainess, I just think that's cool, so.
Before I wrote this, I used to write soap operas, and we, in that world, you write people like Erica Kane, and they are villains on some level, but you have to find a way to make them sympathetic, and you get to see their moment years, and the audience loves them and roots for them, and they are strong and they're powerful, and it's sometimes considered a long-lived media, but I think that there's a lot of room there for breaking a character, like breaking that. And when I was writing this, I thought of Dorothy, and I thought it's like, well, we're making Dorothy, we're making her into something that she wasn't before, and exploring that. So.
It's really a bad character. Like that needs to be taken down.
Yes.
Like she needs to go. Or does she have a reason?
That's the question. There, she does have a reason. And yeah,
You'll find out.
I wonder if, sorry to add one more point, I wonder if kind of taking likability out of the equation for female characters almost allows them to be a lot more complex. I wonder if our villains, our female villains, maybe are more complex, at least to us.
Well, also, I try to not make my main characters too pretty. Because people still associate, it's like a fairy tale, people still associate depictions of prettiness with moral goodness. So, like, obviously they get pictured on the cover of the book, they're photographed, they're pretty, but, like, my descriptions of my characters, especially Heather, but also Lena, and even Sam from Before I Fall, they are not supposed to be any prettier than, like, a 6, like a 5 or a 6. Because most people are 5s and 6s. That's how it is.
More 6s.
Yeah.
That's what we need.
I have a thing I like to call Disney Fest with a bunch of my friends every 6 months or so, where we just like marathon all Disney movies and see how well they hold up. I love every single Disney villainess way more than I ever did as a kid. I mean, we watched The Little Mermaid like a month ago. Ursula is by far the most interesting character in that entire movie. Not just because I really would love to just see the movie from her point of view. I want to know her backstory. I want to know why she wants to take over, why she has this thing against Triton. But she's huge. She's not afraid to take up space. She has the best song. She has the best song in the entire Disney canon. I want to see all those movies redone from all the villainous' point of views. Maleficent too. Don't even get me started.
That with individually is Maleficent. So the set pictures look amazing. So are there any new projects that you guys have in the works that you'd like to talk about? Yours.
I have two more books.
Kendare, maybe?
Yeah, Antigoddess is the start of a trilogy, so the other two are coming out.
This is book one of a 2-book series, so kind of in the middle of the second book, well, at the end of a draft of the second book, so that I'm still very immersed in this for now.
I am currently putting the finishing touches on the sequel to The Art of Wishing, which is called The Fourth Wish, and it comes out next July.
I haven't finished with the trilogy. I'm now back to doing standalones, thank God. So, Panic is awesome. You guys should read it, and it comes out in March. There's a female protagonist named Heather, a male protagonist named Dodge. They do not end up romantically involved. So, yeah, exactly. And I'm really excited about it. And as I said, it's about a game of fear that teens play in a small town. And I've decided that, like my characters, it's only fair. I must now put myself in very scary situations. As I looked to promote the book, so I went skydiving last week. It was fun. And then actually next fall, it's kind of cool. I also have my first grown-up book coming out called Rooms. But I think, obviously, well, not obviously, but there's a lot of grown-ups who read my teen stuff, and I think a lot of teens will read, hopefully, my grown-up stuff, so that's fun too. So next year will be an exciting year.
And if there are any questions from the audience, we'd like to take them now. Let's start here.
When you are writing your heroine, do you ever get moments of panic or doubt, like, oh crap, how did I pass the Bechdel test yet? Or, oh no, she's been scared too many times this chapter.
I've never had those particular fears. Again, the Bechdel test thing, I just don't relate to other people via the mechanism of boys, except maybe I relate to boys via the mechanism of boys, but whatever. So that's never been a concern. No, but I did have an issue where, when I was writing Delirium, it was hard to avoid this. It was only on reread that I was like, jeez, how many times can you mention how fast somebody's heart is beating? Like, this is ridiculous. I don't care anymore. So yeah, I've had that.
I too have had heartbeat issues. many heartbeat issues. Thanks.
Let's go with the girl with the fuller back. Yeah.
So you talked about trying to make, getting out of likability to get a little bit more complex. So how do you balance, drawing in readers who want your heroine to kind of go through her journey and succeed in whatever way that means for her, while, not pushing likability, getting that likability out of there, but still drawing them in?
Has anybody ever read Before I Fall, my book in here? Okay, alright. So, Before I Fall, the main characters are bitches. They're horrible. Like, really, at the start, they're awful people. And so I just wanted to jump in because it's very much a concern when you write a book where the main character is so awful to other people. But, you have to temper it, I think, just with making them, A, seem very real. Sam is very casually cruel to, for example, half of the people in her school, but she does have a great capacity for loyalty and love with her best friends, and she's also recognizable. She's a character you know. You've known her in high school, you may know her in the office, so I think that if you can really build depth of characterization, your readers will, and you also have to promise that there will be some redemption, because a character won't go through it unless, Sam also dies on the 3rd page, so you know that there's going to be some kind of journey that she goes on, and that she will ultimately also get her comeuppance. So, you do have to temper it, I think.
Against the wall?
I'll be blunt. The heteronormativity in Burns. It sounds like all of these characters are cisgender straight females. And on top of that are doing fairly conceived as normal female things, right? You have the girls that are classified as tomboys, you have the girl who's in the drama and acting. Why or why not? Might be a better question.
I think about that a lot, and the villain in the second book, so not this book, but the next one right now, is a very femme guy. Not a straight guy who wears makeup. And I would love to have more characters that were less hetero. I'm trying to think if there's any more. I'm waiting to find out. There might be. We'll see.
I will say in my book, writing a genie love interest, my genie male character, he's been around for a while, he's had a lot of masters, he is used to being, shall we say, submissive in a lot of ways. The ex that my heroine has to save him from is a guy, and my goal for book 2 was to get at least one same-sex kiss in there between my usually hetero couple. So it was something that I thought a lot about while writing this series. Let me just put it that way.
there is some gender bending, and within our universe, I'm trying to get a little bit of that in as well.
Yeah, I mean, and I think, in Delirium, I definitely deal with the fact that it's an imposed heteronormative society, but that is wrong and dealt with as wrong in the book. And she discovers how wrong it is. And like Hunter and Bram are totally getting it on through the rest of the series. But also like in Panic, like I don't think living out of a car or, crossing 6-lane highway blindfolded, I don't think of those, or playing Russian roulette, I don't think of those as heteronormative or girly activities. It's just, it's just what they're doing.
What is it about literature that makes the concept of female protagonists succeed more than any other storytelling medium?
You mean as opposed to film?
As opposed to film or TV or, dare I say, comics?
Because books are better than all of those things.
Is there a thought in the future for any of you to be a graphic artist or do a graphic novel series? Especially because there aren't as many sort of female heroines out there that maybe don't fall into that sort of I'm strong, I look like a 10. So
I actually can't really talk about it, but yes. I have a new book that I'm kind of working on and was working on this summer that is very strange. But I think it would be really awesome. I would love to partner with somebody, like a graphic novel person, because it has a lot of those visual elements. So it was actually my dad's suggestion, because he loves, graphic novels, and then used to collect comics, and then sold them all to pay for his first divorce, and is now furious about it. So never do that. But yes, I think that would be great.
Hi. First of all, excuse my accent. I don't like to practice that much English. Back to my country, I run a foundation that promotes the creation of comic books. And what we do is do some talks and we teach people to create. One of the things I'm very interested is about female characters, and I do a series of talks about how to create characters. But I have found something that most women told me, you can't do that. You have to get a woman to teach that or to talk about that. So it's kind of a problem with some people that I am as a man. I'm talking about how to create female characters. Also, about what you're saying, that sometimes you get Dr. House that is a main character, but is very liked by a lot of people. But if you get a woman in the same kind of behavior, people won't like it. Maybe I found out also that if it is a man writing a female character like that, it's a bitch. It is a woman writing the character, it's a strong female character, because who's writing it? And like you were saying, you say that you don't like to do like amazing beautiful woman, but you get in your cover beautiful woman. I like to draw my characters like a 6, a 5, also I think it's very beautiful. But people keep telling me, why do you draw ugly women? So what is your opinion on those two things about the difference between a man writing a strong character and being called a bitch, and about a man talking about writing strong character?
Well, I guess I would just speak to the going back to like strong women. If you replace the word strong with angry, or the word kick-ass or butt-kicking with angry, or maybe rage-filled, the woman automatically is someone we don't like, right? And I really think that, that's a huge problem, and that it's taking time, but that, these things hopefully will change. I don't know if that speaks to your question at all, but yeah, no, it's a problem.
It's not only that, because you're all women, but how about a man writing a female?
I think it depends on the man writing a female character, though. I mean, I don't think all men write female characters when they evoke them as strong that they actually come across as a bitch. I mean, I don't want to believe that. I don't think that's true of. I mean, plenty of writers like Jeffrey Eugenides write incredibly nuanced female characters as well. I mean, you're right. Perhaps it gets judged differently. I'm not sure. I mean, that would require such a broad survey of kind of the publishing industry, which I'm not quite sure that I have. But I think, yeah, no, I do think it speaks more to just the, again, what we keep returning to, which is still the slow change of characteristics that are perceived as desirable in male characters. It's harder to apply them to female characters and have that really embraced by a wide readership. Although, not that hard, as this panel indicates.
Yes. I actually have two questions. The first one is, you mentioned about like Disney movies. What do you think of how female characters are portrayed in more modern nowadays, like say newer Disney movies and My Little Pony and stuff like that? And the second question is, how do you feel about there not being enough, like, we have like a lot of superhero movies out nowadays, but we see very rarely any good female superhero movies that are out. So what do you think on those two questions?
Well, I think people in Hollywood are assholes. No, but I kind of do. The experience describing it, of what was said to you, is not surprising to me at all. I spent a lot of time in LA. I do a lot of work out there, and it's still run by it literally is like the 1950s. It's like run by like this male, white, Harvard graduated, just like circle of people. So it doesn't surprise me at all, who are all trading interchangeably 22-year-old girlfriends. So it doesn't surprise me at all, actually, that there aren't more superhero movies featuring female protagonists. I haven't seen that many current Disney movies because if I choose to watch a Disney movie, I just watch The Little Mermaid again and again. But I did see, I did see Tangled, and I really liked, but my favorite thing about that movie was, I mean, she was pretty awesome and went around hitting people with frying pans, which was cool. My favorite thing about that part was, though, she kind of, the thing that happens at the end, which is that she breaks the curse by cutting off all the beautiful, flowing, long blonde hair, and she's a little jagged haired brunette. And that's kind of the end, and that's like how she ends up. And I thought that was really interesting, just as a physical, again, inversion of what we usually see. Usually it's the brunettes who are evil and the blondes who are pure and get love, basically.
So both in Tangled and in Brave, the thing that struck me was that the core relationships of the movies were between the heroines and their mothers, which was cool. And it was all like, you know, the teenage coming of age story, like finding your inner strength and being able to apply it in your life. And like Lauren said, aligning your actions with your values. And I just couldn't help thinking, wow, YA has been there for like years by this point. But good on you for catching up slowly.
All right, so we're out of time. All of these authors will be signing at table 21 after this. So if you'd like to speak with them or pick up a book, table 21.